Okay, we are going to do a fall edit. And so we're going to, in Bridge, highlight the photograph that we're going to edit, and we are going to open it up in Camera Raw. Once in Camera Raw, the very first thing you always want to do is crop it. And the original photo is 2x3, so I always keep it on 2x3. If you go to normal, you can crop it any way you want. 1:1 is square, but I'm going to keep it at 2:3, and I'm going to pull this. You can hover just out the side and see that little round arrow, and you can actually rotate this. And I actually kind of like the crop that I originally had, but you can press return, and there it goes. Okay, so now for a fall edit, what I'm going to do is start in the basics panel, and it looks a little bit dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more brightness. I'm going to up the contrast. With the temperature, I'm going to add some warmth. You can already see those fall colors starting to get boosted a little bit. There we go, right there. And because I upped the exposure, here we go. Actually kind of don't want very many darks. There's still some darks over here, so I'm going to up my shadows this time. And that is looking pretty good for now. I'm going to add a tiny bit of clarity. And I'm going to leave vibrance and saturation alone because we are going to individualize our vibrance and saturation in just a minute. So I'm going to go into the curves panel, and I'm going to make a slight curve there. About there. In the sharpening and noise reduction, I typically add luminance anywhere from 20, 28 is probably the max. What that does is it gets rid of a little bit of the noise in your image if you had a high ISO. And mask sharpening, I typically sharpen to about 30, and then I mask to anywhere from 50 to 60, somewhere in there. All right, moving into the HSL adjustments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with hue, and I'm going to change some of the colors in the photograph. Then I'm going to move into saturation and luminance. So in my hue panel, the very first thing that I'm going to do is look at my greens, and I am going to make my greens more yellow here to make it more fall. So I'm going to drop my yellows. In the spring, I'd probably do the opposite of that and make my greens more to the blue side. For the yellows, I'm going to make my yellows more orange there, and my oranges more red. You can already start to see the fall colors really start to get boosted in here. And then my reds, I'm going to pull over slightly to the left. Okay, so what we basically just did is we just we warmed everything by pulling all of these markers to the left, all these sliders. There really aren't much aquas and blues, purples and magentas in my picture, so I'm just going to kind of leave those alone. I'm going to go into the saturation panel, and now I'm going to start changing some of the saturations in my picture. So I'm going to up my reds a little bit. I'm going to up my oranges. Best way to see what it's doing is to slide that slider left to right to see what it's actually doing to the image. And I'm going to drop my yellows a tiny bit. And the reason why I dropped my yellows is because if I boost my yellows, actually maybe I will boost them just a little bit, then my greens get kind of fluorescent if I do too much of that. So if I up my yellow like that, all of a sudden my greens start to look really kind of fluorescent, and I don't really like the look of that. It would depend kind of on the image. So I'm going to boost my yellows to about there. And my greens, since most of my greens are yellow green, because I made my greens more yellow here, in the saturation panel, when I'm sliding this green back and forth, it's not doing too much, but I'm going to go ahead and drop that a little bit. All right, drop that to about there, and then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to adjust this green just a tiny bit. Sometimes it's nice to see that green. I'm going to do about there. I do see a tiny bit of aqua in my sky. I'm gonna make that more blue. Okay, I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna boost my blues to the right to kind of get my sky showing a little bit. That's not doing much. All right, now I'm going to go into the luminance panel. In the luminance panel, I'm going to start with my greens. I'm going to drop my greens a little bit, and I'm going to pull down my yellows, and it's just creating some deeper tones. If you look in this area here while I adjust that, you can see if I brighten that, add luminance to my yellow, it kind of washes it out a little, whereas if I pull it down, it starts to get that deep, rich color. Same thing with my orange. I'm going to drop that luminance just a tiny bit and drop the red a tiny bit. And I'm going to drop this blue and watch what happens to that sky. If you take it too much, it obviously looks really fake, but if you drop it down just a little tad like that, it will add some blue into the sky. Again, you don't want to do too much because it will end up looking kind of fake, especially along this edge. Watch this edge as I adjust this blue. Then you can really kind of see the white against that, so you don't want to see that, so then it looks over edited. Okay, there we go. So this is a pretty good start. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this panel here. This is split toning. This is a fun panel. Try not to go too overboard. Again, we want our image to look not over edited and true to the original photograph. But what we can do is, before we can see any change in the color, we can adjust our highlights and our shadows. And so I'm going to up the saturation here just so I can see it changing. I can always adjust this. It's on a red hue, so it's adding red hues to my image. So obviously I'm going to put that at about maybe 15 to start with, and then I can slowly change this. Again, we want warm colors, so I'm going to add, I kind of like that red right there. And then with my shadows, I'm going to up that, and I can then drag this and see. Ooh, I kind of like that purpley tone. And then once you kind of like the tones, you can go back and forth with how much you add to it. Kind of like it on more highlights than shadows. So maybe I can drop that down a little bit. Great. All right. I'm going to go back into this basics panel, and I'm going to drop my exposures a tiny bit so I can really kind of maybe see that blue sky a little bit better. Excellent. That is pretty good there. So from before and after, we've got our before picture and our after picture. This definitely enhanced the fall colors. So a big difference between these two. Once I'm done, I'm going to go in and I'm going to save the image. And I'm going to press save. And then I'm going to go ahead and press done. And that is how you make a fall edit.